Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and today we are back with more. Uh, not with more. Basically, um, I wanted to start a series on historical documents. I've already talked about a couple. I know I've done a long series on Thomas Paine's Common Sense, where I basically read and broke down um, that particular pamphlet written by Thomas Paine. Uh, in the early days leading up to the Revolutionary War, before there was a before there was a Declaration of Independence. It had not yet been written, so this was a document Thomas Paine had written and distributed among the colonies. I can't remember if I've done any others, the important documents like this. I think I did one on the Declaration as well. I can't remember if I have or not. I'd have to look that up. Regardless, what I'm wanting to say is I'm going to try to start producing more of these historical documents where we take a look at the document itself, a bit of its history, a context of the document for the time, and kind of break it down. So, because honestly, I feel that this is something that is needed in the world today. But I figured we'd start off with a good one. The Magna Carta. And the Magna Carta itself is pretty interesting. Um, it is a document brought forth um, from a number of nobles and barons. Here's from history.com. We know who signed it, but we'll never know for sure who wrote it. The Magna Carta was an agreement between King John and a group of English barons in response to years of the king's misrule and excessive taxation. Despite a closing line suggesting the charter was given by John's hand, the charter was more or less forced on him by the barons. Many 19th century historians suggested that the charter was written by one of its most influential signers, Archbishop of Canterbury, Stephen Langston. However, the document's exact wording was likely the product of months of back and forth negotiations between the king and his noblemen, the barons. Um, let's just continue reading through these. This next one says, though considered a founding document, the Magna Carta had plenty of precedents. The roots of the Magna Carta are found in other charters granted by English kings at the beginning of their reigns. In 1100, Henry I had issued a 20-clause coronation charter promising to rule justly, offering the church greater financial freedom and reduce royal meddling in the marriages and family inheritances of his barons. Although Henry kept few of these promises, his charter nonetheless served as a basis for the barons' negotiations in 1215. The Magna Carta was unique, however, in several respects, including its length and detail. Its timing, it had been 60 years since the last royal charter, and the fact that it was an offering by the king to his nobles, rather than a demand by the nobles to their king. So you have to remember, at this point in history, um, the kings did not have complete, and it's kind of hard to point to, but the barons had some strength to push back on the kings. But the king often had a lot of power himself and would often interfere in the day-to-day. Um, and as some of them mentioned here, he would overtax the church. He would overtax the baronies. And it also talks about they wanted the king to offer the church greater financial freedom and reduce his royal meddling in the marriages and family inheritances of his barons. So again, it's this tug and pull of who's got more sway. And next it talks about England's greatest legal document, the Magna Carta, was a failure in its initial form. Intended as a peace treaty, this first Magna Carta never took full effect and failed to avert war between John and the nobles. By September of 1215, the barons had garrisoned Rochester Castle in opposition to the king, while John had successfully petitioned the Vatican to have the Magna Carta annulled and all the rebels excommunicated. It was only in 1225, 10 years later, that a new king, 9-year-old Henry III, reissued an abridged version of the Magna Carta as his own coronation charter. So again, we see that there is this conflict over power between the nobles, the barons, and between the king, in this case King John, who signed the Magna Carta in 1215. So, yeah. You'll also see this has a lot of comparisons to and influence on the Declaration of Independence as the colonies tried to enforce their own independence from England and the king. So, Section 4. Three of the Magna Carta's original clauses are still part of British law. Magna Carta laid a foundation for lasting real legal concepts like the ban on cruel and unusual punishments, a trial by jury of one's peers, and the idea that justice should not be sowed or unnecessarily delayed. But the document also addressed very specific concerns that don't quite echo through the ages, including a ban on fishing weirs, and a mandate on the proper width for the boats of cloth used to make the monks' robes. When Henry III reissued the Magna Carta, its 69 clauses had been reduced to 27. It remained that way, with minor changes, until the 19th century, when British parliamentarians set about pruning obsolete laws from the many-layered British legal code. By the mid-20th century, only 3 clauses remained on the books. These remaining laws grant freedom to the Church of England, guarantee the customs and liberties of the City of London, and most importantly, forbid arbitrary arrest and the sale of justice. So yeah, it guaranteed a level of freedom to the church, um, which remained. Um, it guaranteed certain rights and customs to the City of London, which is in the southern east portion of the country of England. It's down around the southeast of England. I can't remember exactly where. It's not far from the coast. But yeah, certain freedoms and liberties and customs. And finally, it forbid arrest just because someone decided to arrest you, and forbids the sale of justice, meaning you can't just buy your way out. Number 5. There's no single original copy of the Magna Carta. Multiple copies of the Magna Carta, a sheet of parchment with approximately 3,600 words, written in vegetable-based ink, were distributed to individual English country or county courts during the summer of 1215. Today, 4 of those copies survive. The British Library holds two, and the other two are in the collections of the cathedrals at Salisbury and Lincoln. At the beginning of World War II, Winston Churchill tried to force Lincoln Cathedral to donate its original Magna Carta to the United States, where it had been on display, in hopes that such a gift would create support for an alliance with Great Britain. Such a strong-arm donation would, of course, have run contrary to the property rights enshrined in the document itself. In the end, the cathedral's Magna Carta spent the war under guard at Fort Knox, but was returned after the war. Yeah, which you have to remember, at the start of World War II, the United States did not automatically take part in World War II. It was the same way with World War One. It's like, we'd rather not get involved. It would later, but to begin with, the United States tried to stay out of the actual fighting and just said, "We'll sell you all weapons, munitions, supplies, anything you want, but we're not going to take part in the war." Of course, eventually they do, and they do join in on the side of Britain. Um, it also says a handful of other Magna Cartas are versions issued between 1225 and 1297, when the charter officially entered the English statute books. In 2007, a 1297 Magna Carta sold at auction for $21.3 million, the most ever paid for a single page of text. So yeah, several versions were issued between 1225 and 1297. Remember, this is originally written and signed in 1215. But we also mentioned that it was reissued and amended a number of times, even in 1225 for King Henry III's coronation. So there are changes as we go through history in the text. The final piece of information it wants to list to us here. If you call it the Magna Carta, you probably aren't from England. According to standard British usage, King John's Great Charter has 63 clauses, but no definite article. It's simply referred to as Magna Carta without the. The charter was written in Latin, in which there are no exact equivalents for an or those particular uh, articles in identifying articles in English. The word an, or the, the. But it was also signed by men who would have been fluent in Latin, French, and Middle English, which is a slightly different form of modern English. You have Old English, Middle English, but it developed into modern English. So yeah, 1215. I'm wanting to say this is the age of Shakespeare. Because I think Shakespeare was born in 1205. No, I've got him way off. Shakespeare was in the 1500s in Stratford upon Avon. Still, he was only 300 years after the Magna Carta. So it'll help give you an idea of how different English is. Chaucer, I think, was probably closer to the era. Yeah, Geoffrey Chaucer, born in 1343. So it's much closer to the age of Chaucer. So this is written even before the era of the writings of Shakespeare. And, to be honest, even slightly before the era of Chaucer. But it's much closer to Chaucer's era of writing. If you try to read Chaucer's works in the original text, yeah, yeah, you'll be like, what? But that's to give you kind of an idea of how different it was. And um, they were also fluent in French because I think at this time they were also still under the rule of the Plantagenet kings. Not kits, kings. There we go. I gotta reset my feet down here. Yeah, the Plantagenet kings. We have a number of them listed here. But essentially, the Plantagenets are kind of the descendants from William the Conqueror, also known as William the Bastard. Let me try to pull you up a little more information on the Plantagenet kings. But William the Conqueror himself was also known as the Duke of Normandy. Normandy being a place in modern day France. Thus, why they spoke Latin and French. Latin, of course, being the influence of the church. Come on, internet, work with me here. But yeah, the French, as I'm saying, is basically born out of William the Conqueror sailing across the English Channel from France into England and conquering the English as a people. Of course, they had a king. I'm wanting to say King Harold, but I'm thinking that's because I'm thinking of King Harold Hardrada of Norway. Well, modern Norway. He's of the Scandinavian area because the Vikings were also at this point coming in from the north. England's an interesting combination of things. But as I was saying, Duke of Normandy coming in from the across the English Channel, bringing French as a language into England. Um, it's not wanting to work for me in the internet here because my internet sucks ass. But anyway, the Plantagenet kings are descended in a manner from um, King William, or William the Conqueror, William of Normandy, William the Bastard. So yeah, but let's continue on here. But for American newspapers, museum exhibitions, and politicians, Magna Carta nearly always merits the article. Just meaning that it merits the article verifying the. So it's the Magna Carta. So it's simply in a matter of the language. As we talk about it, it's actually originally Latin. But yes, the Magna Carta originally brought about in 1215 and brought to King John to sign at Runnymede in England. So yeah. But it's meant to be kind of a peace treaty. Of course, that all falls apart, we know, because I just read to you where he eventually, John, once again goes on attack of these barons. Um, and even asks the Pope to excommunicate those who rebel so that he can legitimately attack them. So, um, let's see. That's interesting. According to Wikipedia here, it says at the end of the 16th century, there was an upsurge in interest in the Magna Carta. Lawyers and historians at the time believed that there was an ancient English constitution going back to the days of the Anglo-Saxons that protected individual English freedoms. They argued that the Norman invasion of 1066 had overthrown these rights and that the Magna Carta had been a popular attempt to restore them, making the Charter an essential foundation for the contemporary powers of Parliament and legal principles such as habeas corpus. So, once again, we're coming back to the idea of the Norman invasion of England. That Norman invasion of 1066 is what we just got talking about. William of Normandy invades England from France. But yeah, they've got here, it has a full name, Magna Carta Libertatum, which they say is medieval Latin for Great Charter of Freedoms. But it's more commonly called Magna Carta, also Magna Charta, or Great Charter. Yeah, it was agreed to by King John of England at Runnymede, near Windsor, on the 15th of June in 1215. So once again, like I said, this is a pushback on the Plantagenet kings by some of the barons. There we go. King John, the one that they pushed this upon to have sign it, was the King of England from 1199 until his death in 1216. So literally just a year after he was forced to sign it. He lost the Duchy of Normandy and most of his other French lands to King Philip II of France, resulting in the collapse of the Angevin Empire and contributing to the subsequent growth in power of the French Capetian dynasty during the 13th century. So, like I said, there's a lot of interesting issues here from 1066 on through the 1200s. Let me see if there's anything else in here we want to mention. Exemplifications, later exemplifications, clauses in detail, clauses remaining in English law. And again, these are the clauses remaining in English law. Like we were referring to, there's three particular things that are still in there that still affect today. That the church shall have certain freedoms monetarily, that there are certain customs and liberties granted upon the city of London, and that you can't just be arbitrarily arrested or purchase justice. But yeah, but as always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tries to tell you something you have difficulty in believing, ask them to cite their sources. But as always, I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, later.